Welcome to the third show of Sectorverse, presented by a junior VC. Here, we have a candid conversation with specific people from specific sectors. As in today's sector, we're going to talk about EV and EV charging infrastructure. These folks go one step ahead, and they let us know more about what they're building and what specific niche categories they're building to. Today, we have Shishir from ChargePoint, one of the biggest EV charging companies in the US. So, hey, Shishir, welcome to Sectorverse. So, can you just start off telling us more about yourself, about how exactly you started off your career in EVs, and you kind of remained in EVs for a long period of time. So your days at BIT building EV vehicles, and then going to UC Berkeley, taking part in Hyperloop competitions, meeting Elon Musk, and then today we're now working at ChargePoint and building their superchargers. Could you just elaborate more on that?
Oh yeah, sure. Thanks, Ryan, for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to come and speak with you guys. It's been a pleasure seeing your work and the things that you're doing for India and the Indian sectors to educate and make people more aware of the market is amazing. And I think that's a very valuable initiative that you guys are doing. So talking a little about myself, coming from a humble background in a city called Meerut, or maybe I'll say a town called Meerut in UP. It's a small place. Parents are both professors, and they always strived the best for me. They were always like, you should go what you want to do. You should focus on not the materialistic things, but what you actually want to do in life. And I think I've lived by it. So the journey started in VIT, where I think in second year, I people say in US called the sophomore year, where I started working towards building cars. And I didn't know what I was going into or what I was getting in myself into. Would it be a combustion vehicle, electric vehicle? I had no idea about it. I just wanted to build something with my hands, getting it dirty, right? That's what the dream was, to build something else. So luckily enough, or I'll say fortunately enough, it was a stroke of luck that happened. I joined Team Mojus, and it happened to be an EV Formula student team. And it was a new thing back in 2013, 2014. Not a lot of people had faith in EV market, especially in India. Nobody knew about it. So it was a big challenge for us to get our ground up and running. And I was there for 3 years, headed the team towards the fag end of my 3-year tenure. Started as an intern, worked my way up all the way towards the head of the suspension department, and then the body design and whatnot. But coming short of it, it was, I think, one of the most valuable experiences throughout the undergrad, because that showed me that perseverance can get you what you want in life. It's all about the hard work that you put in. Right? And I think you might have experienced the same thing in doing your coursework and your extracurricular activities that you had throughout your undergrad, right, and your grad school. So I think that's very important. You have to realize that perseverance can differentiate you. It's not the talent that does that. Talent plays a role, but you have to just keep grinding at it. That's the bottom line of it. From there onwards, moved on to pursue my master's in finite element analysis in UC Berkeley. And my drive for building something never stopped. So I was like, oh my God, I just can't sit in front of a computer, do simulations all through the day. Just writing code in MATLAB was not enough for me. So I reached out to a few folks. I knew about Hyperloop back in India itself. I knew it was a good technology. I wanted to do something with it. And I joined the Berkeley Hyperloop team. When I joined the team, again, it was starting from fresh. Not a lot of people knew about it. It was the same scenario that I had dealt with in undergrad. So I knew the quirks. I knew how to maneuver things. And oddly enough, we were able to work through all the quirks, all the hassles, and all whatnot. And we were able to get selected in the top 20 team to go to SpaceX in 2018.
Sure.
And I think that was a big
how
thing.
Different was, like, say, the experience of building an EV vehicle versus, the Hyperloop? I'm assuming, Hyperloop is also very unconventional when you think about, the technology that is there. There are a lot of physics / these vacuum tubes involved in it. So how different was the experience in building such a drastic thing? And how did you kind of connect the whole EV experience that you had with the Hyperloop experience?
Oh yeah, so yes, they are drastically different technologies, but as you think about it, give me a cue. One. Okay.
Sure.
So basically, if as you asked the question about what's the difference between an EV vehicle and Hyperloop technology, there are actually two different domains of the world of technology. But when it comes down to the basics physics, it's electromagnetism versus electrons, right? In one space you're charging, you're driving your propulsion using motors, and one way you're doing propulsion using motors and magnetism. So all it comes down to is basic physics. And what a lot of people have said, you have to think about the basic principles, the first principles, and I think that's very valid in every problem in developing technologies, which is related to hardware. Oddly enough, I was actually able to replicate quite a bit from my undergrad and use some of the experiences that I gained from there to basically, I'll say, catapult the Hyperloop experience at Berkeley, because again, we were starting fresh. So it was not like there was something oddly built enough that we had to develop on. It was like, okay, we are doing a white paper. We're starting from point one. What do we want? What does someone know that can help us to get there? So that's where the conversation all started from. There were a lot of challenges where we had to figure out how to deal with low pressure vacuum. So what happens for the viewers in Hyperloop is imagine a long tube of steel, which is depressurized, which is basically there's no air inside there, or there's very less air inside there. So as you've driven any car, right, the faster you go, the more force or the more drag force you acknowledge onto the car. And that's what deters the cars from going even faster. And that's what consumes more energy, more fuel. So I think this idea came up in 1930s or I think 1910s. I don't remember the exact date, but Elon again catapulted into something. Oh, let's try this. This is exciting. So what he said is, and just I think it was a white paper that was generated by SpaceX, that why not just take the air out of the system and see what happens? And believe it or not, the cars can go really fast. They can go up to like 400 kilometers per hour in just a short span of time. So I think that's where you have to understand that, yes, there's different dynamics. Electronics change a lot. You have to understand that things will not behave as you expect them to behave normally in normal environments. And that's the biggest challenge that I see is there. Apart from that, if you think about the scalability of that technology, it is a very viable technology. It's a very safe technology as well. There are challenges, but it's more on the infrastructure side, not on the side that, oh, you can't build this through or not. That's not the problem. It's more of, okay, you have to get the infrastructure up and running. You have to invest a lot of money into it. Then the other side is just maintenance. Like you have to maintain a vacuum pressure, right? You have or close to a vacuum pressure. So that's energy consumptive, and I think we have to come up with innovative solutions to basically make that scalable. And I see companies are working for it, but there's a long way ahead for it. And I think people will figure out, smart people, there are a lot of smart people who are working on it, and they will figure out, I guess, that this will be a life-changing event. It would be something like as happened like 1903, right? Wright brothers just flew something up. I think that's what's happening. That's what we're seeing in the transportation industry. A lot of exciting things are coming up, and Hyperloop is definitely one of them.
Very interesting. So from there on, ChargePoint came in, and you've been there for quite some time now. So let's just take a segue and talk about ChargePoint, right? This gives us a moment to talk about the company. How did it start? Could you just tell about I'm sure you were inspired by the fact that that EVs are the next big thing, having seen the revolution that has been happening in the US and rest of the world, of course, like in China, Hong Kong. But there is a very important segment of EVs, which is a charging, which is basically the charging stations, right? And ChargePoint does that. And they start off long back. Could you just tell us how did they start and their journey, from the time that they've started, the founders plus and how exactly it's been?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I'll tell you a funny story behind it. So I'll tell you the story how it started, and I'll tell you how I relate to it. I remember one time in Berkeley, it was my entrepreneurship class, and one of the professors was talking about, are you guys excited to do something new and you should come up with ideas? And I was like, oh yeah, Tesla is going up and a lot of EVs will be the next big thing. And I ran up to him and I'm like, oh, we should definitely build charging stations, and that will be the new thing. And he was like, yes, that's a good idea. Have you thought about it that there are companies already doing it? And I was like dumbfounded at him. I was like, no, I have not looked at anything of that sort. And he was like, yeah, go check ChargePoint, go check EVgo. But the focus was ChargePoint, and that name just struck to me. I was like, oh, so there are already people who are doing it. Oh, gosh, I didn't know about it. So again, that's the difference you see, right? It's the informational bias also that comes into play. But coming back to, again, that was just a small tidbit I want to discuss with you or share it with you guys. Coming to ChargePoint inception happened in 2007. And I think I didn't even know what EVs were in 2007. The company's name was called Coulomb Technology. And I really like that name. Not that I don't love ChargePoint. I love ChargePoint's name as well. I think they've really captured it well. But if you think about what's a charge, the SI unit of charge is Coulomb. So they were literally going down to the first principles and saying Coulomb Technology. And I think that was a very unique name itself.
Did the founders have a background in physics?
Yes, founders. So one of the founders was actually the mayor of the city back then when he started. And one of the founders was a hardware engineer, and he had been working for some Bay Area companies for a while. And he just built what happened was he built a small EV for himself, and that was not an EV, it was like a hybrid EV for himself, and he was having trouble to take it around and charge it. And that's where the electric bulb went into his head, like, oh my God, there's a big opportunity right here. We should build charging stations. And that's where it all started. They started, I think there were 4 people who invested in the company. There were 4 early people, founders. They built the hardware around it. They built a small charging station, and they showed it to the city. They didn't commercialize it. They actually showed it to the city, so that they saw that, okay, there is a potential there. And that's where it's inception. So 2007, they started the first thing. They didn't have a product till 2009. And in 2010, the current CEO, Pascal Romano, joined the company, and history has been the point from there on. With it's been growing, and it's been the largest charging station or the infrastructure company in the US with a market share of 85%. And it's not just the hardware; it's also the software, the culture, and passion that the people have in the company. It all resonates with everyone. And again, the motto is to transform e-mobility, and that's what we all strive for. It's the people in the company work for it and they live for it. So I think that's what ChargePoint is in a nutshell.
Very, very interesting. So you spoke about having about 25% market share, right? And that kind of suggests that there are other players in the market, and there are players who can probably give you some sort of competition, even though they don't have the market share as such, with the likes of like say Tesla superchargers, Blink charger, which again IPO'd very recently. There's EVgo that partnered with GM, and there are a bunch of lot. So how different is ChargePoint in terms of the technology and in terms of its market positioning?
Oh yeah, that's a very good question. I rather answer it this way. Peter Thiel says that you should not focus on competition.
Yeah, it says this thing is going to get over. Why am I? Right. Yes.
Yes. So answering your question about the competition, right? So Peter Thiel says that, and he frankly says that you should not look at the competition. I think that's a very valid argument, because what happens is if you try to see what the others are doing, you lose focus or you lose your own vision. And I think that's very important. Now, but you still have to address the competition, right? That's like a catch-22 there. So what you do is you look at the bigger vision. You see, okay, what is the motive of this entire company? What do you actually want to do at the bottom line? Yes, you want to make money, but you also want to revolutionize the transportation industry or the EV industry, as you can talk about, right? So the more players that enter the market, the better it is, right? It's better for you, it's better for me, it's better for the guy who's walking down the street or the guy who's pumping gasoline in his car, right? It's better for all, because competition will drive prices down. It will make the technology more affordable. It will also create innovation in the sense that things that we might not be doing today, it will force us to do something that might be innovative in the sense that, yes, it has to be cost cost sensitive. It has to be accessible to more people. So I think all in all, I don't mind having a competitor and telling me and knocking on my door, guys, you have to ante up the game, right? You have to push a little more harder than that. What you'll be doing. So I think that drives innovation, and I'm happy to have more people in the game, because you know what will happen? It will just help us to get to the goal much quicker.
Interesting.
So despite the fact that yes, there are a few players in the market, and you can say yes, they will take some market share from us and whatnot. But if you think about the pie, right? If the pie grows larger, the numbers might shrink, but our pie percentage will grow itself. If you think about from, let's say there's 100 people, we have 85 people right now. Okay, the competitors have 15. Let's say tomorrow there are 200 people and we own 70% of it. But the numbers grew, right? So I think it's all in all fair for us to have some competitors and it is the name of the game, right? You can't just be like, oh, we don't have competition. ChargePoint is different in the fact that we are a little ahead in the game. We have a competitive advantage, as you can say. And there are things in the pipeline with the people and with the technology that we are developing inside that will definitely propel us forward in the next 5 years, and we'll see from there.
Interesting. And apart from that, you guys also have the charging network and the infrastructure that is already built, right? The community that was very important in charging infrastructure for EVs, which I think kind of makes you stand apart. And if I may put as well that you have a lot of these private contracts that seem to kind of be working for you, right? You have tie-ups with, if I'm not wrong, Google, Waymo, and you have tie-ups with whatnot, all the biggest automobile manufacturers. So that is a very interesting point and look at it, and as well as compared to say, for example, Tesla superchargers, which kind of builds chargers only for Tesla vehicles, right? So we can consider Tesla to be the iPhone of automobile, whereas ChargePoint is kind of building the Android version of automobile, right? Like you're basically building charging infrastructure for all the other vehicles and Tesla superchargers, and are basically building only for them. Very interesting. So this gives us a good segue to kind of talk about the industry, to know more about how exactly the industry has evolved and what exactly is that in industry, and we can discuss further. So this kind of gives us a great segue into speaking about the industry as such. Very exciting industry that is kind of not new, right? When you think of it, EVs actually are nearly a couple of decades old or longer. But in commercializations, I still feel that EVs were a couple of decades old, with Nissan Leaf, Volvo C30 electric, Tesla starting in 2004 in itself. So what is happening to the industry now, and why all this buzz?
So yes, I'll say there's a lot of buzz, but I think the buzz is justified in the sense that that something new is happening, right? Like we have been witnessing gasoline vehicles for like what, 100 odd years now, and this comes back to the same story what happened with Ford and when he started making combustion vehicles. It's like there were horse cars before, and then the combustion vehicle came into the picture. Suddenly there was a lot of buzz, though, because of the advent of internet and advent of a lot of communication and globalization. The buzz was not visible to everyone. But now with Instagram and LinkedIn and whatnot, websites and Twitter, the buzz is visible to all. And that's what I think the power is for internet and the globalization. So whenever something new happens, there's always a buzz around it. And the new is not always a bad thing, right? It's new is something that we are not aware of today, but actually helps us to go into something better. And what I would rather say is you have to think in terms of different markets, right? Like the US market and the Indian market is much different. An average commuter in US has to basically commute around 20-30 miles, which is approximately, if I do the calculation right, 45 kilometers per day just to get to work. In India, that's not the case. Like India, rarely people go out of the cities, and I'm talking about metros, not saying intercity transportation. I'm talking about, let's say you have to go to work. It's around 10 kilometers, 20 at the max. which is a completely different market. So the buzz in US is different, the buzz in Europe is different, the buzz in India is different. And I think we need to, every market player needs to understand that there's a difference between how a technology is used and how it can be deployed in different regions.
Sure. So that's a very interesting take. Kind of, the bus is not in the US, but technically we see that the repercussions are felt in India as well, right? Most of the EV vehicles, the stock of automobile companies in India, they don't have any vehicles, but the stock rallied just by the buzz of it, and which is rightly so. I think the industry is evolving world across. But having said that, there's this chicken and egg problem of this industry, right? Having read about this industry, having been following, there are two of these most important things. One is the infrastructure of say having these EV vehicles, and the other one is the technology of these chargers, right? Which is more important in the short-term goal, and how do you look at it in long term?
Yeah, so for answering this question, I would rather go into the consumer's foot, right, or consumer's head, as you say. So imagine you being the consumer. Would you rather have a car where you can't charge it, or would you rather have a station where you will charge the car, which you can rent probably from someone, or you can borrow it from someone? So I think that sort of helps you answer the question, because I rather have the charging station and the facility, or the option, I'll say, right? The option that I can actually charge my vehicle if I have to buy it tomorrow. So that helps you justify the value of, yes, there should be a charging station or a charging infrastructure in the country or in the region. Now, coming to the fact of, yes, it's a chicken and egg problem, but as I answered, it helps you drive the conversation of why it's justified. Means because one can say, oh, I don't even have a car, but the car can come tomorrow. But what if the car comes right now and you don't have the charging? What's the value there? There's no value there. So I think that helps you drive that conversation from there.
Very interesting, very interesting. And how different is the infrastructure setup when you think of it, between developed countries like the US versus countries that already have a lot of EVs, like China, and countries that are trying to get there, like in India, where it's a lot more denser than the two.
Yes. So the way I would rather put this is, India is a very, very different market than the other players. So what I'm trying to allude to is how often do you fill your gas tank? That's the question that you need to ask in India, because your distances are lesser, or I'll say shorter.
Yep.
And what happens is, generally people don't actually top up their entire vehicle charge. Not the charge, sorry, the gas tanks. They just fill a minimum amount that they want to go from point A to point B. And if that's the case, there's a justification that you do not need a lot of charges in India. A home charging system might just work really well in India, because first of all, there's a limitation to current charging infrastructure, which we can talk about later, is the amount of charging it takes. It's not like a gas pump that just dumps the fluid. So you are dumping energy into a system, which creates a lot of heat and other problems, and the system has to handle it on itself, which is an inherent problem which a lot of companies are trying to solve. So there is a time limitation. Now, coming from a user's perspective, do you want to spend 20 minutes of your life every 4 hours, 5 hours, 10 hours, let's say X amount of hours, standing in the queue, first of all, because again, the population density plays a role, that you have to stand in the queue to get to the charging station. And then at the charging station, you have to stand 20 minutes to charge the car from going from point A to point B. So that's the conversation that needs to happen, because a lot of people, as I said, you talk about the buzz, right? People start chasing the buzz. They don't ask the bottom line question. They don't ask the questions that will really help drive the conversation of, okay, what justifies what? Because US is doing it that way. Doesn't mean that you can just replicate that and work it in India. There has to be some modifications to that. There has to be some adaptation that happens from there, and then make it work for the people in India. The market is a developing market, and there's a lot of potential there. But I think there's a conversation that needs to happen. Okay, that you can't just take somebody else's work and put it there. You need to put your own thoughts into it, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that's where the limitation is, and I don't see that happening yet, because I see the people are still following the bus, which I think needs to happen a little more.
Absolutely. I think you raised a very important point, right? That the EVs cannot be replicated in India. When you think of much of the internet technology, they probably can be replicated, but like say the likes of say food tech apps or stock brokerage apps. But this is something like a deep tech, we can probably call it, and that cannot be replicated. Having said that, so there are a lot of these. Yes.
Sorry to interject, Shreyansh. I'll say not replicated. I'll say they can be replicated, but they have to be modified.
Interesting.
You have to, as you said, yeah, they can be replicated, but they have to be, I'll say, retrofitted in the sense that it works for the markets. You can't just say it's a one-to-one.
Interesting. Yeah. So that kind of makes me think about how, what exactly can be done in India, and India being predominantly a two-wheeler market. When you think of it, and as well as the whole ideology of number of two-wheelers that we see over here is probably much more than any other country, which suggests that two-wheeler EV market is obviously bigger, and that's kind of a no-brainer for us. But how different is the charging infrastructure, for two-wheeler versus a four-wheeler, and which is which obviously seems like a practical solution as well. How do you see it in terms of owning a charging infrastructure by a society and a community versus, like, say, having a public setup of chargers and then going and paying over there?
Yes, and I think that's a very good conversation to have. Is India being predominantly a two-wheeler market, right? Like, yes, there are a large number of cars in India which are four-wheelers, but predominantly an average Joe, or you can call it an Aam Aadmi, will actually go for a two-wheeler rather than a four-wheeler. It's more convenient. It doesn't make sense to have a four-wheeler. You're just crowding the place. If I want to go from point A to point B, the fastest would be a two-wheeler. That being said, to charge a two-wheeler, you don't need to go to a charging station. And that comes down to the core technology. I think Ather is doing a wonderful job. Ather Energy is doing a wonderful job in capturing that market, and they did do the homework, and they did realize what was the best way to get into the market and make sure that they stay there. And I think Ola is also coming. I think they're also coming in with two-wheelers, and they're understanding that yes, there's a different demographic, different market needs. You don't need to have a charging station, as I said, to charge a two-wheeler. You can just charge it at home, go from point A to point B, come back and charge it at home again if you have to. The charge do last for around 6 to 7 hours in a two-wheeler, and that can take you from point A to point B easily. You don't have to worry about standing in a queue and charging the vehicle. So that's the difference between a two-wheeler and a four-wheeler. Coming back to a four-wheeler again, which we'll talk about the residential and the network. Because of the distances in India, you might not need to charge again if you have a charging infrastructure at your apartments, let's say. You might not need to even stand in a queue and like you do it today to fill gasoline, because you don't have a gasoline at your apartment, right? So that's where the conversation has been involved. And I'll say India predominantly will be a market where you won't see public charging infrastructure, but you'll see residential. You'll see people going to offices and charging their vehicles there. That's where the money will be, and that's where the meat of the I'll say the profits will be. Because let's say you partner with a company called Amazon, right? Or you partner with Google in India, and they provide you services where you come in, you charge your car for free, or that's your perk, right? That's where your money is. That's where it will take you from, we don't need a public charging station infrastructure, versus there is one which already supports it, because you're going from work to home or to going to a cinemaplex. Let's say you're going to a mall. There'll be a charging station there. So you charge there. But the key factor that comes down here is the numbers, right? And fortunately or unfortunately, the population of India, it makes it a little difficult to scale the technology, because you can only have a limited number of charging stations, right? Those are not cheap things to just install and let people charge. Yes, you will get the dollars from them, but again, the problem starts with the queue. How much will you be willing to stay in the queue? That also needs to be answered, because today in US, people generally don't have a queue here. Like, either people have a charging system at home where they charge the car completely, or they just do DC fast charging where they have to just top up. They don't go from 0 to 100. They go from, let's say, 30% to 60% in like 10 minutes. and that justifies their from point A to point B distance, which is much higher than what it would be in India. So the question comes down to the unit, I'll say not unit economics, but the units that will be placed in a residential parking state, residential system, or a company setup. The other part of the problem is the public transportation. I think there's a very big value there as well, because you see everybody uses public transportation in India. So talking about e-buses, fleets, which are basically the delivery trucks as well. They could be modified to or retrofitted or just develop new ones to become all EVs. And the companies can benefit from that as well, because yes, carbon footprint is less. And what you can do is you can actually save a lot of money, because as you might know, that the cost or the per mile cost for driving an EV is much cheaper in comparison to a gasoline vehicle. So it just justifies the cost for the business to even change and adopt that technology.
Interesting. You kind of pointed out a very interesting point, saying that the per mile cost or the per kilometer cost is lesser for EV. Could you kind of elaborate on that and kind of tell us more about it?
Yes. So again, let's talk about a car called like everybody knows Tesla, right? So Tesla has a range of around let's talk about Model 3. It's around 350 miles per charge. Now a charge would take you about if I'm not wrong, it takes about 110 kilowatt hour, and you would charge it for 20 minutes. That would be around let's say from 20 to 80, it would cost you around $10. Oh, not $10, sorry. 5 into 20. So let's say it rounds about a full tank, which is $50. Let's just take some even numbers and say that.
Sure.
So today the prices of gas in California are around $5. So my gas comes around $80, oddly enough.
Sure.
And I can go around for the same charging, which is 50 versus 80. I can go the same distance.
Interesting.
With 350, and Tesla can do the 50. So there's a $30 just net profit right there. And that's just, I'm making up some numbers. I'm just taking the dollars of what I use and what I assume a charging session would take me. Which is, I definitely know for a fact that it is lesser. I just don't have the numbers top of my head. So just by some crude calculations, you have a $30 profit there, or $30 savings, not profit, but I'll say savings for the consumers. So these could be just crude calculations. And I think when you do that for scales, right, when you do for, let's say, fleet businesses and things whatnot, the numbers will be much, much better for the company that's trying to change or adapt.
Interesting. So I think we kind of spoke about charging as a community being the front runner for charging businesses. If you see, not just in the US but also in countries like India. So how important is this charging infrastructure, or we can call it like say the network of these chargers, right? Earlier we discussed about ChargePoint being the say Android of charging stations, versus Tesla being like say the iOS, right? So how important is building this network so that I can go charge at another company's charging infrastructure and still be fine and work with it?
Yes. So hardware is, again, as now we need to come down to the SaaS part of this business, right, or the SaaS part of technology, and we at ChargePoint call it CPaaS. So ChargePoint as a SaaS. So coming back to that is the network. Network is where you scale things. Hardware is just a delivery mechanism, right? So you need to have good hardware to support the network, because if you have an unreliable hardware, you will not be able to have a good software that does not do anything. Again, the chicken and egg problem. If your iPhone doesn't work well, what's the point of having iOS 14? So things go hand in hand from their perspective. But let's say, coming down to your question is, tomorrow you want to charge the car and you don't have a network. Where do you go find a charger? Let's say you even know where the charger is in Google Maps. Now, do you know whether the charger is available? Is the charger functional? How much is the charger charging you right now? The per unit cost for charging your vehicle from let's say 10% to 20%. Is there another charger that does it for cheaper, or is there any charger that's faster? So these are the questions that you need to answer. Let's say everything is answered and you go to the charging station and you plug in your car. It doesn't support your car.
Interesting. So you
Every
kind of
car
get to know that through the mobile app that you probably have.
yes,
and interesting.
And that's where the network or the charging infrastructure network, we call it the NOS, helps you understand that, okay, I'm going to go to this station. This station is compatible to my vehicle. This charge station is going to cost me X dollars or X rupees, and I'll be able to do it quickly. And you know what? There's another feature that we can actually, there's another feature that's very, very, very useful. It's like you can book a slot. I want to charge my vehicle from X to Y. There is a cancellation fee for that, but let's say for convenience purpose, you're going to work for like at 8 o'clock. You want to charge your vehicle from 7:30 to 8. That's the best time. You can just book the slot, go there and do it. How convenient that is. Had you not had the charging infrastructure network or the software that we're talking about, how would you be able to know that? How would you be able to do that? So these are the features that make the hardware more lucrative, make the technology more adaptable, and it's just easy for the consumer. You have to again come back to the consumer. Somebody has to use it, right? It's like, yes, I have the best golden egg, but if I can't make an omelet out of it, what's the use of it?
Interesting.
It's just a showpiece.
Interesting. So we kind of have realized the fact that software is the secret sauce. Hardware is the show for these EV infrastructure that we set up, and rightly so, right? I think that's where the scalability lies, and that's where the unit economic lies as well. So very interesting take. So this kind of makes us believe that it's not just one straightforward business model that we've spoken about, the community or the software, but there are various business models, right? Like if you say there's a B2B business model like ChargePoint is doing, there's a B2C where they sell to the community and the community kind of gives it ahead. There are rental batteries for these switchable batteries again, and whatnot, right? Could you just kind of tell what's happening in the Bay Area so that folks can understand and kind of see that there are various other models around it?
Oh yes. So as you talk about the business model, so I think everybody loves SaaS, and that's where a lot of people have made the money. But SaaS is just for a namesake of basically, I'll say, amalgamating a lot of business models. It just helps you understand it more cleanly. And as you illustrated, that B2B, B2C is just for the viewers, it's business to business, business to consumer. Now the consumer can be anyone, right? Now, if you take in the broadest perspective, the consumer could be a residential company, you and I, or a business. This comes down to what sort of service you want. You want Express Plus service, which is the fastest charging. Again, it will be highest kilowatts. You will get charging within 10 minutes. Or you want to have something that you are using at home. So these are the things that we need to understand when we talk about business to business models, because needs differentiate. And I think the best solution would be to compensate on needs, which ChargePoint has been able to do. And I think that a lot of companies are trying to do it. They just have a different way of doing it. And talking about switchable batteries and like rental batteries, a company called NIO, which is from China, the China electric vehicle maker, has this innovation of, okay, yes, we will not charge the vehicles, we will just switch your batteries. I'd say that's a very good way of dealing with this problem. The only cost or the only drawback, again, not trying to criticize the technology, again, it's a wonderful way to do it. And there's a website, there's a link in YouTube, you can go check it out. The way they just swap the batteries is amazing. It's not an easy task, trust me. We also tend to make our systems modular because we have to, like, let's say, service them regularly, and modularity is the way to go about it, because you can just take something out, put something in, and make it work. But doing that is not an easy thing. It's a very challenging task. Coming back to that, swapping batteries could be a solution in India, right? It could be, yes, the problem is capex intensive, because the company who is going to do that is actually taking all the liability, all the risk. It's investing in developing the infrastructure, investing in developing the batteries, it's investing in developing the switchable modules. And let's say it's working with one vendor, of one car manufacturer or one OEM, but the other one doesn't adapt. So they have to sort of retrofit those cars and making it workable. which there is a company in the Bay Area which is trying to do that, which is they take existing cars and try to make them retrofittable with swappable batteries. So India could be a market for that, and I think that's something that we might need to discuss some of the time. But I think there is a lot of potential with that market in India. Yes, there will be challenges for it.
Interesting.
But that would be a market for India.
Yeah. So so what I see is that switchable batteries, can be a solution if they are sold to communities, right? We've seen a lot of stuff being sold to communities and inside complexes and stuff, and these communities can have these chargers, and in the night, they can be charged, and the vehicles can be aside, or they can be again sold to the the big firms and MNCs like Amazon, Facebook in India, and they can kind of hold it, and we can kind of build. There can be a business built around it as well. Yeah, having said that, a lot of batteries have been flocking around, and that is an issue, right? We are now trying to solve an issue of fossil-free environment, but lithium-ion batteries in itself are kind of causing this havoc because there's no ideal solution today to kind of dispose them. We have seen various news, people talking about it, commenting about it. So what is the solution for it? And I'm assuming there is a business model around this as well. How exactly can you look at
it? Yes. The way I would rather address that question or have the conversation with you is about the more advanced human race becomes, the more energy they would use, the more waste they would produce. And you have seen this in the last 100 years. The amount of waste that we have produced in the last 100 years surpasses the amount of waste that was generated in the entire, I think, last 10 to 3,000 years, right? It's just because we are pushing the boundaries of technology, we are getting ahead in what we want to achieve. Who knows that? So it's all a simulation or not, that's a different conversation to have. But the more advanced we become, the more waste we will generate. And that's just part of the problem, or from looking from the other perspectives where the opportunity lies. There are a lot of companies, a lot of researchers that are going in developing batteries which will address this problem. Not today, maybe, but in the foreseeable future, there will be batteries which are made out of aluminum oxides. There are batteries which you can use the entire chassis as energy storage systems made out of carbon fiber and graphene. And there will be things which I hope there are that you can use them as batteries. That's the most logical solution, because I agree with you. There's a lot of carbon footprint that happens in trying to avoid the carbon footprint which was using EVs. So is it like a circular thing that instead of trying to solve the problem, you create more problem because you're going away from coal, but now you're mining lithium. You're mining. Where's the end to it? So I think there has to be a lot more research and R&D in that to basically.
So we come to a conclusion that EV manufacturers and EV companies have stitched the story that it is sustainable, but there's no solution for lithium-ion batteries, disposable of lithium-ion.
Not today. Maybe in the foreseeable future. But yes, I cannot lie to anyone, right? I can't paint a picture that's all beautiful.
Very interesting.
It's a development process. When we started using coal, yes, it was powering up all the plants, but what did it end up doing to us?
Very interesting.
If we don't address these questions, if we don't think about them, it's a very glorious picture. But if we do address them, there is a lot of potential and opportunity to develop ourselves.
Very interesting, and rightly so, right? So this might be a good solution as to how we kind of build infrastructure in India, how say US, China built it, and it's a great segue, and still believe that there's a bright future for EVs. And still believe that there's a bright future for various around business models around it. So we probably move ahead and wait for the industry to evolve, and folks like you would probably make sure that the industry is riding high. Our next segment is kind of a lighter segment. We would kind of just talk about general stuff. And see, try to get to know what you actually like in other areas apart from EV and where your interests are. So I'll probably go ahead and ask, which is the one founder that you admire the most,
Everybody tends to say Elon Musk, but I have been a little unhappy with him of lately because of all the speculation he's been doing. But I definitely like Peter Thiel. He has been a person who has transformed quite a few industries.
Sure.
And Sebastian Throne is one of them. He has he has also worked and done a lot of good stuff in as you call the eVTOL industry. And I've been following that industry quite a bit for the past 1 year now, and I think that's something I want to do next. That's where I want to see myself doing something. Yeah,
which is
it's as I said, always keep changing, right? It's I think that's where the new future is. That's it's sort of inspired from a show called Jetson.
Interesting.
You basically go in flying from point A to point B, and I think that's a very viable solution for some problems. And I definitely want to be there one day and work for it. But that's the industry I'm trying to follow, work upon. And it was there were a few companies which are basically doing really good work. One is called Kitty Hawk, Risk. They're all in the Bay Area, and they the partners with Boeing and Google. There's a company called Joby Aviation, which partners with Hyundai, and they just recently acquired Uber's aviation as well. So there's a lot of push in that industry, and there's a lot of push in the market to make it viable. So I think that's something I'm trying to follow up and see what's next in the Bay Area.
Very cool, very cool. Which is the best place to kind of start a startup today? Having been around now and having spoken to kind of people who've been around as well.
I think starting a startup, yes, the area has always been the place where you can easily talk and network and fund yourself. In India, if you want to talk about Bangalore, where there's a lot of talent. It's just, you have to understand this talent that what drives innovation and hard work. So you can find plenty in India, in Bangalore, and Bay Area is also such that it's the same way.
Awesome. I think ChargePoint has been through this cycle, but yeah, scalability or profits.
Wall Street wants profit. Wall Street also wants scalability. So it's a catch-22 question, right? Do I focus on scalability or profit? I'd rather say if you talk about consumer perspective, that's where I'd see things from, because profits can come one day, but if you're not scalable, profits are just pennies. So rather scalability would be my answer.
Interesting. Which company do you admire the most apart from your own? And I'll probably include Tesla as well, since you probably admire Tesla as well. So which company do you admire apart from ChargePoint and Tesla?
I would say SpaceX. So they have transformed the industry. They have pushed the limits, and I think no company in the near future or in the near past, has been able to do that. It has taken quite a few years, quite a few decades for that to happen. So I think SpaceX would be the answer.
For sure, 100%. I think I'll probably choose that as well. If not EV, then which industry?
Autonomous driving or eVTOL. That I'm trying to figure out one or the other. Those are both on my. I'm working towards getting into it now, and I think those would be the next big thing.
Very cool. Awesome. It was a pleasure talking to you. Shishir,
likewise.
Thanks for joining us. It was a lot of insights on the EV industry, and you kind of left us with the next industry in automobile as well, which is autonomous. Kind of big fan of that as well, and we'll probably hope to get a new guest or folks who are pioneered in autonomous as well, to kind of explore and see the markets that can be initiated in the rest of the world, and that can be initiated in India as well. All right, it was a pleasure talking. Thanks for joining us from the Bay Area, and until then, see you. Take care.